All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Ashley Limbers and I'm the marketing coordinator at Total Computer Solutions. Total Computer Solutions is a full service provider of IT support and services, including network security, cloud computing, network administration, and managed backup services in Central North Carolina. Today we are hosting Cyber Insurance to Protect Your Business, presented by Murphy Holderness, Cyber Insurance Specialist at Marsh & McLennan. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel, and we'll bring them up at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to Murphy. Our presenter today has been working heavily with cyber insurance for the past 9 years. Prior to joining MMA, Murphy was a cyber and technology underwriter with CAN, one of the nation's largest carriers, where his responsibilities included underwriting cyber risks. For the last 5 years, Murphy has worked at MMA, where he helps guide clients through the evolving exposures that cyber threats present to business operations.
Perfect. Thank you, Ashley. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Hopefully today I'll hit on some high-level topics surrounding cyber insurance. And again, feel free to utilize the chat feature as well as the Q&A at the end if you want to go into a topic further. There's certainly a lot of avenues we can go down, and so hopefully we'll paint a clear picture of where we're at. Quick overview, as Ashley mentioned, I work for Marsh McLennan Agency as a business insurance consultant. I've been with MMA for the past 6 years, and prior to that, I worked for CNA for 3 years, where I was underwriting professional tech E&O and cyber insurance. I managed a territory that was basically the Southeast and about a $7 million book of business. So got to see a lot of different types of risk and get a different perspective from the carrier side of things when it comes to cyber insurance. Marsh McLennan Agency, for those of you who don't know, we are a subsidiary of Marsh, who's the largest insurance brokerage in the world. Marsh works with the Fortune 100 companies. Marsh McLennan Agency, we specialize in working with those companies that spend anywhere from $10,000 to $3 million a year on their premiums. One of our advantages of being a part of the Marsh network is we do have access to all of their tools and resources. And so it really allows us to bring together all our benchmarking and offer solutions on a larger scale. Talking about cyber, when we're meeting with clients and discussing with prospects, you know, what are the biggest concerns to their business operations in this modern era? You can see cyber attacks and cyber threats are 22% out of business threats. And it makes sense if you think about it with how digital our world's become. Most businesses are reliant on technology in one form or another. And if that technology goes down, whether it be a cyber attack or extortion, it can really cripple your business. And we see it in the news every day where local municipalities, Target, I mean, it doesn't matter. Hackers are going after schools, government, business, and it's an ever-evolving world where the hackers aren't just stopping if they don't get in today. They'll keep trying for the next couple of years. And so cyber attacks, cyber threat, we continue to hear are just, you know, keeping people up at night. Okay, how do I address it? What can I do to protect myself? Because, you know, having the digital platform is so essential to operating our business today. 82%, and this is a Marsh Poll, 82% of the respondents indicated that, you know, increased risk of cyber attacks leading to theft of their company money or data, and 80% of respondents expect an increase in cyber risk around disruption of operations over the next years. This was a poll that we did looking forward to, again, try and grasp where our clients are having concerns and what is worrying them from an insurance perspective. And almost everybody has cyber on their radar. I'll dive into that and what a policy makes up and help add some context over what's going on there. So cyber risk, for those of you who don't know, and I apologize, this might be rudimentary for a couple, what does a cyber policy cover? So cyber policies cover both first-party information and third-party information. And so there's two components to it. Basically, you've got your data breach response and your internal restoration of your own data, your business interruption for when your system is down, and extortion claims if someone's holding you ransom. Those are your first-party items. Third-party would be damages that are filed by members outside of your organization. So if you had customer data get out, for example, that's where you would see third-party claims with privacy liability, network security liability, media liability. And this is also inclusive of credit monitoring, notification costs. There are a number of requirements for third parties, which can make a cyber incident very expensive. And so typically, we look at the claims and make sure that we have both the first-party coverage as well as the third-party coverage. Both components are equally as important. In here as well, you'll notice that there's business income. And this would be if someone locks down your system and you're unable to operate for a day or a week and you're losing revenue while those operations are down. Similar to your property business income in the event your building burns down, this will replace lost revenue due to your inability to operate. As we can see, the world continues to have cyber events, and the pricing is catching up. And so this chart I like to show is just a reference from 2018 to 2020. You can see that top dark blue section is the percentage of clients who are receiving increases on their cyber renewals. And as you can see, that number is going up year after year, whereas only 30% of clients were getting increases in 2018. As we look at quarter two 2020, we're now up to 63% of clients are getting increases. This is primarily driven by an uptick in claim activity and the carriers needing to charge more rate in order to fund for the risk. In talking with one of our primary carrier partners, they said through August of 2020, they've already had just as many ransomware claims as they had for the entire year of 2019. And that's still with 4 months to go in the year. And so as expected, as they continue to pay out more and more claims, the pricing is going to continue to increase and clients are going to continue to receive increases on their renewal. You can see here's the historical rate, and this is based on US cyber clients. The rate has gone up to a 6.4%, and is that the rate price per million. And you can see it's trending upwards at a significant amount, which is indicative of of the claim activity going on and the challenges and headwinds that the cyber industry is facing. So what can we do? This is where I'm going to add some context, and I'll go over claim examples as well. But I really want to paint a picture of, if you are not currently looking at your cyber policies and controls, why it's important. How do we keep the pricing down, make sure we're securing coverage, and then at the same time, making sure we have best practices to prevent a breach from ever occurring. Similar to a car, you're going to change your tires, service it, and hope that you never get in an accident and have to have that insurance to replace the car. Well, we want to be doing the same with network security. We want to make sure we're doing all the right things on the back end, servicing, making sure we're doing up-to-date firewall, antivirus, and then the insurance is there in a worst-case scenario, but the primary goal should be to never have to use it. So what I've done here is I've cut out some questions from an application that one of our carriers use. I think it's very good and can help you see where you should be looking at improving. At the end of the day, from a pricing perspective, we want to have as many of these boxes checked yes, so that we can get the best terms and conditions from our carrier partners. I like this form in particular. It's pretty all-encompassing in my mind of just basic things that everybody should be doing. If you don't have an IT person on your staff, this is where partnering with a TCS or a IT service provider can add a ton of value, because they can help you analyze where you're at today, as well as come up with a plan to make sure that you're doing these network security controls. A lot of the carriers now, due to the claim activity, will not quote you or will charge an egregious amount if you're not doing basic practices such as in place and making sure that someone's updating that firewall as trends continue to develop. Just having it in place isn't enough. It needs to be actively monitored. I'll give you just a second to run through this. There's a couple on here I'd like to point out. The multi-factor authentication is a big plus. Remote access, limited by a VPN. VPNs help cut down significantly on access into your network. Makes it harder for the hackers to get in. And the annual penetration testing. Again, making sure that the security and protocols that have been put in place are working. Not that we want to make sure we're not just checking the box. Just again, I cut out another section from an application here to help provide some guidance on items that you should be looking at. The carriers are looking, they want to make sure that you are protecting your client's data as well. Not just your own network, but any confidential data that you're storing on clients, whether that be credit card data, mailing address, anything that a hacker could use to then impact a third party. It's becoming more and more important, and there's a higher emphasis to make sure that these controls are in place. There's also at the same time a lot of state regulation going on where the states are starting to get involved and regulate cyber insurance and policies and notifications. And so a lot of states will require you to send certified postage, notification to all impacted individuals. And so again, our goal here is to try and limit the exposure up front. And that's where we really recommend partnering with a knowledgeable security organization or IT service provider that can help guide you through all these ever-developing areas. Getting to the claim side of things. So, that's great. I've got all my procedures, protocols in place. Where's the claims activity coming from? Where's the vulnerability? 96% of claims still come from email. It's the most common vector for hackers to get into your system, and 90% of phishing accounts are how they get in through the email. And so, as good as your protocols may be, there also has to be some personnel training. One, we would hope the firewalls that are put in place in the up-to-date spyware, prevents the emails and phishing from getting through. But at the end of the day, you need to make sure that your employees are being proactive as well and not clicking through emails, or if something looks off, not going down that path. I'm going to go into a couple claims examples here, and this will help show just how certain areas of cyber reform would respond. So privacy and security, this would be if somebody gets into your system and they get in there to destroy information, get into hacking, they get sensitive personal information. Privacy and security liability covers the damages and defense costs for covered lawsuits. The big portion on this is the privacy breach notification. So in the event that you have an incident, a lot of the statutes require that you notify any potentially impacted individual. An area that we recommend looking at in your cyber policies is whether you have a dollar amount associated with this coverage or whether you have a number of notified or impacted parties. A lot of the premium carriers these days will allow you to select a number of notified or impacted parties limit. So instead of saying we're going to have $1 million limit to provide credit monitoring, notification costs, etc., they say regardless of the cost, we're going to cover the cost to notify up to 100,000 individuals or 500,000, whatever the number may be. This is important because each state has different requirements. And if you think of just doing certified mail, setting up credit monitoring, identity fraud insurance, call center services, the number can exceed expected. The number can exceed the limit quickly, and so it's always preferential to have notified individuals. In our opinion, it just helps eliminate any ambiguity with regards to cost and limit. This coverage is very important. Again, you know your organization better than we do, but a lot of our clients are working with hundreds of thousands of potential customers a year, and to notify all of those could be a significant financial impact. Computer and legal experts, another area, we mentioned the first party and third party components of the cyber policy. Another area that we want to make sure all cyber policies have coverage in would be in the forensics costs. So you've got the breach that occurred and you're having to notify individuals, you're having to pay out damages. Well, on the back end, the forensics costs can be just as expensive to make sure that the hackers are out of the system and to determine what exactly happened and that the system is clean going forward. Cyber policies will come in, and if structured correctly, they'll have cost in there to make sure they cover that forensics element. It's very important to make sure that this is addressed, as it can go underlooked as it's not a part of the standard limit. And so to make sure that you have the forensics cost in there is very important. There are two areas in the cyber policies where we're seeing significant claim activity at the moment. Cyber extortion is one, and social engineering. Touching base on cyber extortion, that's your ransomware. So basically you come in one day and your system's locked up and hackers are saying, unless you send us 5,000 Bitcoin, we're going to delete everything on your system. These are more and more prevalent, and again, the way they get into your system the majority of the time is through a phishing email where an employee clicks on a link, and then next thing you know, the entire system's locked up. The carriers will work with you and hold your hand as long as you have the cyber extortion coverage, and they've got a dedicated coach and advisor that will tell you, hey, we think we can recover your data, or no, this one's legitimate, we need to pay the ransomware. One of our colleagues had one come up a month ago. A claim came up, and the carrier paid over $100,000 in ransomware to unlock the client's data. And had they not done that, the client did not have adequate backups, and it would have been, worst case catastrophic scenario. The other one, as I mentioned, is social engineering. Social engineering fraud is when someone is hacking the emails to make it look like it is coming from a boss or a vendor, and tricking you to voluntarily part with funds. So they're saying, hey, Murphy, wire me $50,000. We're closing on a property today. I thought it was my boss that sent me the email, but in reality, it's a hacker. Social engineering fraud is sublimited typically to $100,000 to $250,000 in limits. And it's very important in your cyber coverage form that you check to see if there's a dual authentication requirement. Some carriers require that there's a dual authentication provision. So if you get an email, in order for the coverage to apply, someone would have had to pick up the phone or verify that the funds transfer was legit via a different means of communication than when the request was received. So if you get a phone call, you got to send an email. If you get an email, you got to send a phone call, vice versa. The premier carriers, in our opinion, have done away with this provision because basically they realize, hey, you're not going to have a claim if you're actually doing the dual authentication requirement. And so a number of the carriers now don't require that, and they'll provide coverage for anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000 in coverage in the event that an employee accidentally sends away or voluntarily parts with money due to a phishing scheme. Just in North Carolina, on my clients alone, the past 2-3 years, I can tell you I've been a part of $1.8 million that has been transferred out, and thankfully we've had coverage in place and positive claims experiences, but this is very prevalent. I've seen it happen to a school, to a manufacturer, and then even some large charitable organizations we work with. And so they're not just targeting, your Targets or your Best Buys or your large organizations. They are blasting out emails to thousands of companies every day. And again, all it takes is one hit for them to potentially have a payday. And so again, this is where it comes to some of that personnel training as well, where again, we hope you partner with the TCS and someone and have protocols in the background, but then at the same time, you need to be training your employees that if something looks wrong, please call, please double check before sending any money. Business interruption. So in the event that you did have that ransomware hackers get into your system and they tie up your system for 3 days, if you are heavily reliant on IT, that could be a significant revenue loss to your organization. And so the carriers provide business interruption to help supplement lost revenue in the event that there's a cyber loss. So basically, if your system's inoperable for 4 days, you would go back and historically say, okay, over those 4 days, we would have made $1 million. Then the carrier would potentially refund you up to $1 million there. Dependent business income. This is kind of business income 2.0. And so, again, with the premier cyber carriers, you can include dependent business income coverage. And this is basically applicable to where if you're using a service provider or cloud and they go down and you're unable to operate your business because an organization you're dependent on is down from an IT perspective, there can be coverage there as well. The example given is a cloud service provider system is infiltrated and shuts down for an extended period of time, which harms your business. So there's coverage out there that as long as it's structured correctly, you can protect yourself and protect that revenue from a large scale event. Reputational harm. This applies, we see this happen more so with our nonprofit and organizations who are accepting donations. In the event you had a breach and your reputation's hurt, someone might, instead of donating $50,000 to you, say, hey, they're getting smeared in the PR right now, and they've got a reputation of not protecting their clients' data. I'm actually going to give this $50,000 somewhere else. We can get reputational harm coverage in there to help respond there and replace that lost revenue. So if you have a claim scenario, and I know I jumped over a number of other scenarios there, but if you have a claim or an incident, what does that look like? And so we put together a simple slide here that kind of shows a time frame of how that would happen. So you have your discovery where you determine what has happened, what's going on. Typically, most clients are alerted to a breach when a customer calls in or after money is sent away and a vendor calls back and says, hey, I never got payment for that $50,000, and they realize it went to somebody else instead. From there, there's the first response. The first response should include calling your cyber carrier immediately. A number of the cyber carriers have dedicated cyber breach teams, and they're staffed 24 hours a day. And so in the event something happens, they want to be brought in immediately as time's of the essence, and they will help guide you through exactly what you need to be doing. External issues, from that point, once you've engaged the carrier, they'll get involved. They'll help with your public relations. They'll take care of notifications in the event that it's determined you need to. And then the long-term consequences would be the forensics coming in on the back end. How do we improve going forward? What damages have we caused to anybody? And what does the new landscape look like for us? By putting you with a cyber carrier that has these dedicated breach teams, the real goal here is to have us be an extension of your team and have the carrier be an extension of your team by having their dedicated response individuals get involved. And that is high level where I was going through. I went through it pretty quickly. Does anybody have any questions or an area that they'd like to discuss in more detail? Obviously, there are a lot of different avenues we can discuss when it comes to cyber insurance.
Great, thanks, Murphy. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and type those into the control panel. We'll give you a minute to type those in.
Yeah, so someone asked, if I can't answer yes to all those questions, will my premium be more? No. And so I'm going to go over to that slide. So we want to be truthful in the application. If you can't answer yes, you know, a no is a perfectly acceptable answer. What it'll do is a carrier may come back to us and say, hey, depending on the circumstance, we're going to require that they put this policy in place before we provide terms and conditions. If you don't answer yes to all the questions, you may receive higher retention. So instead of a $5,000 deductible, the carrier may come back and say, hey, we're going to give you a $20,000 deductible until we see that there's a firewall in place. You know, where it will impact you price-wise is long run. We want to prevent claims from occurring so that we can keep your rates as competitive as possible. And that's where TCS and other IT providers will get in and do an assessment of where you're at, see your vulnerabilities, and then help you come up with a plan to address. The carriers are realists. They don't expect perfect policies for every single risk they look at. And that is just step one. And so if you come back and say, no, we don't have data loss prevention, as this example application shows, then they'll work with you to get that in place, or refer you to a specialist and say, hey, you need to work with them and put this in place in order for us to provide coverage.
Great.
Good question.
Murphy, we have another question.
Yeah.
Do I need a standalone cyber policy, or does the throw-in coverages on my property policy suffice?
Yeah, and that's a great question as well. So a lot of BOPs and packages that are your property and general liability coverage for your business, they'll include a throw-in provision of a cyber policy. And so these limits will be $25,000 to $50,000 and really only cover high-level exposure. Our recommendation is almost always to take out a standalone cyber policy to make sure that you have the adequate limits. You know, minimum limits we recommend are $1 million. And then also, more importantly, to make sure you have those supplemental coverages such as social engineering, the cyber extortion, forensics, and then business interruption coverage, which are typically not included as a part of the BOP or package cyber policies.
Great.
Any other questions? I'm looking at the chat. I don't see any. I do have some parting advice, whether it be with MMA or your current agent. We would certainly recommend that you review your cyber policy and specifically ask how it responds with regards to social engineering, what to do in the event of a breach. The takeaway I forgot to mention is, you know, when your system gets hacked up, if there's a ransomware, you know, the first thing you want to do is call your insurance agent. Well, how do I even get their information? It's all locked up in our system. Or how do I call my IT guy? His email is in the system that's locked up. So we recommend having a written response plan available in order to have pertinent contacts written down so that you can get the ball rolling.
Great. Thank you, Murphy. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. We appreciate you. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, everybody.